Hello, everyone. Tonight we are standing at the edge of a vast Triassic floodplain. The wind hisses low across the grasses. You lower yourself toward the soft earth, squinting at the ground. Something's off. In the pale glimmer of moonlight, or maybe imagination, you can just make out three distinct impressions in the clay. Long, narrow. Three toes. No heel. No drag marks. The prints seem to float above the surface. You lean closer. It looks like whatever made them was walking on tiptoe. That's right. You're about to follow the ghost of something that probably would have eaten you in one confused bite. You probably won't survive. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments so we can build a time-traveling fossil club. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along the muddy flat just behind those prints. Each step is pressed lightly, so lightly that you wonder how something heavy enough to survive in this rugged wilderness managed not to sink into the mud. But that's the secret. These weren't heavyweights yet. They were quick, lean-built, like compressed springs. It's as if their bones floated in place. The tracks aren't fresh, obviously. They've been preserved for around 230 million years. But the air here still smells like thunder, like wet fern, like something slithering just out of sight. You keep walking. A flash of memory pops into your brain. A YouTube comment war, probably. Dinosaurs weren't even real. You laugh softly. If this is fake, it's the most committed prank in evolutionary history. Beneath your feet are the layers of deep time stacked like old receipts. The Triassic layer is where things got weird. And toe walking weird. You press your fingers into one of the toe prints. It's oddly deep for how light the rest of the track is. Like the creature pushed off, with the tips of its toes launching its stride from muscle-packed feet. Scientists call these creatures digitigrade, meaning they walked on their toes, not the soles of their feet like you do. It's the kind of thing you wouldn't notice unless someone pointed it out. But once you do, you can't unsee it. All those graceful reconstructions of theropods, they're toe walkers, always have been. But here's where it gets deliciously confusing. These weren't birds. Not yet. These prints belong to something older, more primitive, something testing out the future. You're not alone on this plane. Shadows dart between cycads and horsetails. These are early dinosaurs, yes, but they're not dominant. Not yet. The world is still ruled by cousins and precursors, massive archosaurs, armored croc-like brutes that look like they were drawn during a fever dream. But here on this flat stretch of mud, someone new has passed by. Someone light enough to stay above the sludge. Someone who dared to lift their heels. It's like watching the first ballerina try pointy shoes in a bar fight. You follow the prints to a rise of dry shale. The wind changes, and suddenly you can picture it, a small, upright creature, maybe a meter tall at the hip. Long tail balancing its every move. Its toes pressed down with precision. Heel lifted high, calves tense. Each footfall a whisper. It's not a stomp, it's a decision. Odd fact break. Did you know that elephants technically walk on tiptoe too? Their feet are built like high-heeled wedges with a giant fat pad underneath to cushion their steps. Nature loves a tiptoe. Back to the plains. You crouch again. The prints start to turn, angling toward a copse of low, scrubby trees. The pattern changes, slightly closer together. It slowed down. Maybe it spotted prey, or maybe something spotted it. Historians still debate whether the first toe walkers evolved this posture for stealth speed or something else entirely. One theory. It was about readiness. Staying on your toes keeps you poised to leap, pivot, or run like a panicked squirrel. And in this world, every second counted. A light joke floats into your mind. What did early dinosaurs use for self-defense high heels? You shake your head. But really, evolution built these creatures like they were getting ready to sprint forever. Walking on tiptoe narrows. The footprint increases stride length and lets the foot function more like a spring. More energy in, more speed out. Like loading a slingshot with every step. You pause as the trail vanishes into harder ground. No more mud to preserve the memory. Just like that, the first tiptoe walker disappears. But you've seen enough. You've walked beside it. You've knelt in its prints. Your calves ache in sympathy, and something about it nags at you. The world's first dinosaurs weren't the biggest or strongest, but they were light, flexible, experimental. They tried something strange, walking with their heels off the ground, and the world never recovered. You straighten your back and glance across the plain. Somewhere out there under another pile of leaves is the next clue. A bent femur, a curled tail, a perfect toe bone frozen mid-step. And you start walking again. On your toes. The trail of prints leads you farther across the baked plain, but now your attention turns upward. Not toward the sky, though. You could swear there's something circling up there, but toward anatomy. Specifically, how on earth a creature like that could tiptoe for life without snapping its own ankles. You imagine it knees, always bent, calves loaded like coiled springs, and a posture that would make a ballet instructor weep. But this was no dance. This was survival. And to understand it, you're going to have to think like a dinosaur, or at least a wannabe one. You stop by a low rocky outcrop and find a partial skeleton lying exposed. Not a dramatic skull or claw, just a series of thin, curved bones arranged like ribs on a busted umbrella. They belong to the legs. You recognize the unmistakable pattern: hollow bones. The early dinosaurs didn't just walk on tiptoe, they were built for it. Their bones were light, almost bird-like, with air sacs and struts that let them be strong without weighing them down. It wasn't just the feet doing the tiptoeing, it was the whole machine working to keep weight off the ground. You reach down and brush dust from one of the femurs. It's longer than your forearm, but thinner than a broomstick. That's not a heavyweight limb. That's a lever meant for pushing off and launching forward. Hollow bones sound fragile, but they're actually marvels of natural engineering. Bird bones today are the same way, built like reinforced bridges. And while birds use theirs for flight, the early dinosaurs used theirs for speed, fast, light, and constantly ready to move. Odd fact. Break. Did you know that the ostrich, the fastest bird alive today, also walks on tiptoe? It's not a coincidence. Those long, springy legs carry a design handed down from creatures like the one you're tracking. And then there's the ankle. You glance again at the partial skeleton and note the position of the ankle joint. It's not flush with the ground like yours. It's lifted high up above the sole. It looks like the leg of a ballerina in mid-pose, frozen just before a leap. These high heels of the dinosaur world weren't decorative. They were practical. Raising the ankle joint meant more room for elastic tendons, cords of biological rubber that stored energy and flung it back into each step. It was like having a built-in trampoline on each leg. Historians still debate whether this elevated ankle design evolved all at once or gradually over countless failed configurations. There may have been dinosaurs that walked flat-footed for a few million years and just didn't make the cut. Nature, after all, is a brutal editor. You walk on feeling the breeze pick up. The land here slopes down into a dry riverbed, and with it the silence deepens. You hear only the whisper of insects, or what passes for insects in the Triassic. Probably something with too many legs. The more you think about it, the more absurd human walking seems. Heels slamming into the ground. Knees straightening like we've given up on agility. No bounce, no spring, and worst of all, no style. But the dinosaurs. They were stylish. Not in a feathers and flash way, not yet, but in the way a good athlete is: stylish, efficient, honed, and balanced. They lifted their heels like it was second nature, because by then it was. You spot another trackway up ahead, this time pressed into fine silt. The toes are narrow and deeply imprinted, the stride wide. There's no heel mark anywhere. But what catches your eye is the symmetry, the perfect rhythm of step after step. It's not a stagger, it's a run. You jog beside it for a while, trying to match its rhythm. And here's where you start to feel the burn. Keeping your heels lifted even for a few minutes makes your calves ache, your feet throb. But that's because you weren't born like this. The early dinosaurs were. And their posture wasn't just about speed, it was about versatility. You could launch into a sprint pivot instantly, jump over debris, leap onto prey, all without planting a heel. Oddly enough, this biomechanical magic is still with us. Watch a toddler learning to walk and you'll notice they instinctively try walking on their toes before they learn to heel strike. It's like a ghost of evolution reminding us of our ancient tiptoeing cousins. You pause again as the riverbed levels out. You've been walking beside ghosts all evening, and it's starting to mess with your perception. Every shadow looks like a stalking theropod. Every gust of wind feels like breath on your neck. Time for a break. Not yet. You sit beside another exposed fossil, this time just a foot. 3 long toes. Claws still sharp despite the eons. And no heel. The metatarsals are elongated and angled, designed for pressure and propulsion. It's like the creature walked on stilts, hidden in its own anatomy. And now a joke, if dinosaurs were always on their toes, did they ever just chill? Probably not. You can't exactly lounge when half the world wants to eat you and the other half is on fire. You stretch your own feet and try mimicking the posture. Heels off the ground, knees slightly bent, core tight. You feel ridiculous, but suddenly you understand this wasn't a party trick. It was a performance, a survival act written into bone and sinew. And you wonder, what did the first tiptoe really feel like? Was it an accident? A slip in the mud? Or was there a moment somewhere out here when one creature stepped differently, realized it was faster, and simply never went back? You'll never know for sure. But you rise to your feet and keep going, on your toes. You're still following the trail when something peculiar catches your attention. A different set of tracks, broader and flatter, moving alongside the delicate 3-toed imprints. These are the ghost steps of an evolutionary dead end. Someone walked here too, someone heavier, slower, and flat-footed. You crouch and compare. One line of footprints rises like punctuation marks, sharp, deliberate, and high on the toes. The other plods, each footfall smudging out behind a thick heel. And for the first time tonight, you witness history's side-by-side experiment, toe walking versus flat-footing. One would rise, the other would vanish. You imagine it happening right here on this plane. 2 cousins, maybe even from the same clutch, running a prehistoric obstacle course. One teetering up onto the tips of its toes, awkward at first, then suddenly faster, more agile, and never quite coming back down. Evolution doesn't send memos. There are no meetings, no announcements. Changes happen by accident, and if they work, they stick. The Great Toe Lift experiment probably happened this way, a gradual shift in posture that one day became permanent and transformative. You try it again yourself. Heels lifted, knees soft. The effect is immediate. Your hips shift forward, your spine straightens slightly, your body becomes spring-loaded. You're more animal, less commuter. It feels right. Some paleontologists argue that this change didn't start with dinosaurs at all, but with their ancient ancestors, the archosaurs. These creatures, ancestors to both dinosaurs and modern crocodilians, had a tendency to experiment with limb posture. Some splayed like lizards. Others tucked their legs beneath them. A few stood up tall and danced on their toes, probably to impress someone or outrun something. That posture, erect limbs and raised heels, was like betting everything on agility. For the early dinosaurs, that bet paid off. And here's an odd fact for you. Modern kangaroos don't walk on tiptoe, but their tendons work exactly like ancient dinosaur legs. When a kangaroo hops, it stores elastic energy in its Achilles tendons and releases it like a slingshot. Sound familiar? You peer down at another fossilized limb. This one's from a herrerasaurid, one of the earliest known true dinosaurs. Its femur and tibia form an angle optimized for explosive force. Not only are the toes long, but the metatarsals, the bones just behind the toes, are fused tightly and lifted. No ankle slop, no laziness, just tension, stored and ready. Historians still debate whether this posture evolved to help dinosaurs escape predators or to chase down prey. It could be both. Or maybe it was about something stranger, territorial displays, long-distance travel, or climbing over unstable terrain. You follow the trackway into a patch of dappled forest. The air here is cooler, shaded by conifer ferns, and the towering ancestors of modern ginkgos. It's not hard to imagine a juvenile dinosaur darting between trunks, lifting its toes to minimize noise, its tail flicking for balance. You hear a rustle ahead, just wind probably, and picture the scene. A flat-footed peer tries the same maneuver and snaps a branch underfoot. A brief shriek, a blur of motion. One disappears into the shadows, the other doesn't. The ability to rise on the toes wasn't just a physical change, it became a behavioral one. Animals that stood high on their feet could move differently, think differently, react differently, and over time that split the evolutionary tree in two. A joke forms in your mind. Flat-footed dinosaurs didn't go extinct, they just got walked on. You chuckle, but it's not entirely wrong. The ground here is littered with the bones of species that never took the leap literally or metaphorically. The fossil record is full of almost creatures that stood too low, stepped too heavily, or moved too late. And here's something else. You stop and tap your chin. These early toe walkers didn't know they were revolutionaries. They didn't hold conferences or take pride in their foot posture. They just walked, one foot in front of the other, and evolution watched from the sidelines. Some researchers suggest that the tiptoe stance helped these creatures remain quieter in dry conditions where snapping a twig meant losing your place on the food chain. Others believe it helped them stand taller without growing longer spines. Why build up when you can lift from below? You pause beside another footprint deeper than the rest. A moment of hesitation, or maybe a leap. The back claw left a tiny gouge in the soil behind it like a brake mark. Maybe this was the moment it happened, when one foot found lift and instinct said, yes. That. You stare at it for a while. A fossil of a decision. It's hard not to feel admiration. This wasn't just adaptation, it was style. An entire lineage decided the world looked better from higher up, and they stretched their toes to get there. You begin walking again. But this time you don't just mimic the stance. You commit to it. Heels up, eyes ahead. Because in this ancient world, walking on your toes isn't just practical, it's poetic. You emerge from the shaded grove into another clearing, and the air is different here. Warmer, stiller. The ground is dry and cracked beneath your feet, and just ahead, stretching across a low embankment, is something that makes you pause. Another set of fossilized tracks. But these don't belong to a dinosaur. They look similar at first, 3 toes, no heel, but they're wider, thicker, heavier. You kneel down to trace one with your fingers. The claws are blunt, the stride is slower, and the toes splay outward ever so slightly. These were made by an ancient cousin, not a sibling, an ancestor of modern crocodiles. Yes, you heard that right. Long before the stubby, belly-dragging swamp lizards we know today, there existed a line of croc-like archosaurs that walked tall, upright, and tiptoed. For a brief and glorious stretch of the Triassic, crocodile relatives strutted through forests and floodplains like they were trying out for a dinosaur fashion show. They didn't belly slide, they didn't waddle. They walked like dancers, hips tucked under toes, pointed tails lifted high. You look across the tracks again, imagining it. A pseudo-Sushian, perhaps a Gracili-Suchid, moving with elegant menace through the underbrush. Its tail sways side to side for balance, its head held steady, and its feet always on tiptoe. Odd fact break. Crocodiles today still can walk upright in what's called a high walk. It's rare and awkward looking now, but it's a ghost of that ancient, upright, toe-walking ancestry. a flickering reminder that evolution never truly forgets. Historians still debate whether these proto-crocodilians were active predators or ambush specialists. Some evidence suggests they sprinted after prey like greyhounds. Others think they preferred to leap from hiding and seize with crushing jaws. But one thing's clear, they could move and quickly when it mattered. You trace another track, it's deeper at the toe than the heel. Another toe walker. That posture wasn't exclusive to dinosaurs. It had deeper roots, older, more widespread. It was like a secret handshake between survivors, a sign of readiness. And then you spot it and overlap. The faint, crisp track of a small theropod crossing right over the crocodile print, perhaps minutes or millions of years apart. It's as if evolution wanted to stamp this behavior in stereo. You stand and glance around. The sun, or whatever pale light this prehistoric place offers, has begun to dip. Long shadows stretch across the dry ground. You think about how posture shapes perception, how something as simple as heel height could change the way a creature interacts with its world. If you walk flat-footed, you feel heavy. If you walk on your toes, you feel light, ready to bounce. It's not just a physical shift, it's mental. It rewires how you approach every step. You try the experiment again. Flat-footed, plodding, awkward like a grocery shopper late for dinner. Toe-walking, deliberate, stealthy, athletic, like you belong in this wilderness. It's also fun. You find a log and sit for a moment massaging your calves. The ancient crocodiles didn't just mirror dinosaur posture, they competed with it. In some ecosystems, they may have dominated for millions of years. And while the dinosaur lineage ultimately rose, those tiptoeing croc cousins left an unmistakable stamp on history. One joke floats up uninvited. What do you call a fashionable ancient crocodile? A croco stiletto. You groan. Even the fossils would cringe at that one. Still, it fits. These animals weren't lumbering swamp beasts. They were sleek, upright, and experimental. They were trying on the same evolutionary shoes as the dinosaurs, and for a time they walked the runway just as well. You rise again and begin walking, shadowing the intertwined tracks. It's hard not to feel a sense of choreography here, like these ancient creatures were part of the same dance, learning the same moves and waiting to see who'd stumble first. And maybe they did. Maybe there were standoffs between toe walkers, duels of speed and strategy. Maybe it wasn't just about survival, but competition, evolutionary one-upmanship, heel to heel. You pause beside a thin layer of sediment where both tracks end abruptly. No signs of struggle. No chaos. Just disappearance. Maybe a flood. Maybe volcanic ash. Maybe one stepped too close to the future and the other didn't. Historians still search for that moment, the split when the dinosaur lineage took off and the croc line turned downward. But it wasn't immediate. For tens of millions of years, these toe-walking rivals shared the world, walking side by side in different directions. It's humbling, it's eerie, it's oddly beautiful. And you keep walking. Not because the trail demands it, but because you're starting to understand something. The creatures that stood tall on their toes weren't just changing how they moved. They were changing the rules. You find yourself wandering into a narrow pass, flanked by tall cicades and fern trees that shimmer faintly in the damp air. Somewhere behind the foliage, something darts, small, quick, and bipedal. You don't see it, but you feel its presence. There's a rhythm to it, a musical precision in the way the undergrowth shifts and resets. You freeze, and for a moment you swear you hear it. A soft tap, 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 tap. You creep closer and kneel beside a trail of impossibly tiny footprints, three-toed again but barely longer than your hand. Each step is spaced perfectly, like it was laid down with intention. A light creature, light-footed, perhaps no bigger than a greyhound. You follow the prints as they zigzag toward a stony ledge, and that's when you see it. A fossilized skeleton curled in sleep. The body is delicate but complete. Its head tucked close to its chest, tail curled around its feet like a cat. Coelophysis, probably one of the earliest known dinosaurs to embrace the tiptoe lifestyle in full. You crouch beside it whispering so you don't wake up a fossil. And here's the thing. Every part of this creature is built for the tightrope act. The hips are narrow, allowing the legs to swing forward in long, straight lines. The metatarsals, those hidden foot bones, are fused for strength and lift, and the chest cavity air sacs like a bird. Hollow bones. All of it suggests lightness, precision, and athlete's frame. The balance is perfect. You almost don't want to disturb it. But the story presses forward, so you rise and imagine the Coelophysis in motion. Not just walking, not even running, but performing. You picture it tiptoeing through dense ferns, navigating between fallen logs, head level, tail balancing toes, making almost no sound. Not because it's sneaking, but because that's just how it moved. Odd fact break. If you've ever watched a cat stalking across a shelf full of fragile things, that's how this dinosaur moved. Even its internal organs were arranged to optimize balance, nothing unnecessary, nothing loud. You step carefully as if imitating it might bring you closer to understanding. And here's something strange, the fossil's ribs curve in just such a way that you can tell it never sprawled flat like a lizard. It didn't let its belly drag. Its posture was tight, upright. The belly stayed off the ground at all times, like it was afraid to be mistaken for the animals that came before it. Historians still debate how this body plan came to dominate, but the evidence is stacked like vertebrae. Dinosaurs didn't just happen to become tiptoe walkers, they insisted on it. Time and time again, the ones who danced won the day. You watch the surrounding plants sway in the breeze and imagine the sounds of the Triassic night. Chirps, rustles, hisses from something that never learned to whisper. And yet, in the middle of it all, you imagine the quiet steps of your Coelophysis weaving between ferns with the poise of a creature that knew it belonged here. There's a log nearby, half petrified, and the fossil trail goes right over it. You examine the step, it's higher than the others. It leapt. Not a drag, not a climb. Just boop, and it was over. That's toe walker energy for you. And then the prints resume their steady rhythm. That's how it lived. Spring land walk. Spring land walk. Like a metronome in the forest. You wonder how its young learned the rhythm. Was there a mother Coelophysis watching nervously while her brood practiced their pounce steps? Did they stumble the first time, or was it instinct hatched with heels already off the ground? You won't find that answer here. But the footprints suggest confidence. There's no hesitation in these steps, and if you follow them far enough, they disappear up a slope of loose stones that even you would struggle with. Yet this animal left a perfectly spaced trail right across the top. Another joke floats in, what do you call a dinosaur that never trips a toprosaurus? You groan quietly. No one laughs, but that's fine. These bones aren't judging you. You reach the top of the slope, breathing a little harder, and look back. The trail stretches behind you like a thread of thought. Every footprint a punctuation mark in a sentence too ancient to read. But the tone. The tone is unmistakable, light, fast, deliberate. And you realize something else. This wasn't just a matter of mechanics or survival. There was pride here. You can see it in the posture, in the body language carved into stone. These creatures weren't just evolving, they were enjoying it. Historians may never agree on what pushed them to lift their heels, but once they did, they never came down. And that little Coelophysis curled in fossil sleep might have been the first to make walking look like art. You brush a bit of dust from its snout. It doesn't wake, of course, but in your mind you see it lift its head, blink once, and spring forward with barely a sound. You're not just tracking a fossil anymore. You're following a ghost in mid-step. You descend from the ridge into a broad basin blanketed with dry moss and crackling lichen. It crunches faintly beneath your feet, but in your mind's eye you replace the sound with the whisper of a clawed toes brushing across it. You start walking lighter. Not out of reverence, but because you're beginning to feel what they felt. The tiptoe wasn't just a biomechanical quirk. It was an advantage in a dangerous world. You crouch beside a trail of smaller prints, again narrow-aligned, like someone marching on a balance beam. They curve subtly toward a thicket. then vanish. It hits you then. This isn't just about posture. This is about survival. You crawl forward through the thicket. It's dry, noisy. Twigs snap. You wince. Imagine if you were out here 230 million years ago and you made that sound. You'd have about 2 seconds before something faster than your brain could comprehend came barreling out of the foliage. The early tiptoe walkers didn't just glide through the forest because it looked cool. They needed to move quietly. Tiptoeing meant fewer pressure points, less ground contact, reduced noise. And more than that, it meant tension-coiled muscle, always ready to sprint. You find a hidden glade shaded and silent. Saw-maintent, a perfect ambush site. Your eyes scan the ground and sure enough prints. Faint, almost ghostly, pressed into soft silt and spaced far apart. Not walking, running. You crouch again and trace the claw marks with your fingertip. The tips dig deeper than the rest of the toe. That's push-off. Full speed? These weren't lazy wanderers. These were hunters. Or prey. Maybe both. And either way, they had to be fast. Flat feet meant friction. Toe walking meant escape. Historians still debate whether speed or stealth was the primary driver behind digitigrade evolution. But the argument feels silly out here where everything is quiet and everything could kill you. Speed and stealth aren't separate skills. They're two sides of the same terrified coin. You glance around the glade and spot a shallow depression where a small creature must have hidden once. Maybe it crouched here, holding its breath, waiting for a predator to pass. Or maybe it was the predator lying in ambush. You picture it, long limbs tucked in tail, flicked to one side, eyes forward. And always, always heels off the ground. Because if a branch snapped, it needed to be up and moving before the sound reached the hunter's ears. Odd fact break. Have you ever seen a fox stalk through snow? It walks on its toes, placing each paw in a straight line, reducing noise and increasing efficiency. Same ancient logic, different fur. Back in the glade, you test the theory. You try walking heel first, crunch, snap. You switch to tiptoe. The difference is immediate, quieter, cleaner, less splash in the mud, less drag on dry grass. You are harder to track and harder to hear. There's a strange power in it. You feel like you're sneaking into history itself. A movement catches your eye. A lizard, small, modern, darting across a rock. Its flat-footed belly almost scraping the surface. And it looks silly now, primitive, as if it never got the memo. You smile. The tiptoe dinosaurs would have run circles around this guy. But let's not get too smug. Evolution isn't about style. It's about results. And the flat-footed animals, most of them are gone. You wander farther until the glade opens into a clearing that must have once held water. A drying pool. The ground is crusty, but there are tracks pressed deep into the perimeter. And here's where you notice something haunting. The deeper the mud, the more elevated the footprints. Why? Because tiptoe walkers don't sink as much. By focusing pressure on a smaller surface area, mainly their toes, they reduce drag. Their long, stiff ankles act like stilts. They stay above the sludge while flat-footed animals flounder. It's not just elegant, it's practical. You kneel at the edge of the old pool. Imagine a group of early dinosaurs, maybe a dozen edging in for water, wary of crocodile cousins. The bravest one steps light. Narrow footprints. Perfect poise. It gets a drink and darts away. The heavier one behind it, it sinks, leaves a smeared heel. And if anything's hiding beneath the surface, guess which one gets eaten. A joke flits by. Why did the flat-footed dinosaur vanish? Because the mud kept the receipt. You sit back, legs tucked under you. The sky above is shifting pink. Evening in this dreamscape. But there's no rest here. No sitting around the campfire with mammoths. This is an age of anxious motion. Every meal ran fast. Every shadow hunted. And the tiptoe walkers. They weren't stronger. They weren't bigger. But they moved better. Historians argue whether these evolutionary choices were sudden adaptations or long, slow drift. But out here, watching these frozen steps, you don't care. All you see is the result the lightest survived. You get up again instinctively lifting your heels. Your calves hurt, but you smile anyway. That pain. That's evolution tugging on your tendons. And tonight, you follow it deeper. The trees grow denser again and the light fades to a coppery haze. You can't quite tell if it's sunset or sediment, but you step forward anyway, your feet sinking slightly into a different kind of soil. Firmer, drier, and layered in dust that clings to your boots like memory. Here you find something different. A long line of tracks winds across the clearing. At first glance, they look like the usual dinosaur prints, 3 toes spaced in that same purposeful stride. But then your eyes catch a pattern. Something's off. The toes are splayed wider. The impressions are deeper. And at the rear of each print, a faint curve. A heel mark. You blink. Back up. That can't be right. These dinosaurs were supposed to walk on their toes, not plant their heels like some barefoot tourist. But the evidence is right there, a dragging gait, shallow heel impressions, and no hint of spring in the stride. You've stumbled across the counterpoint to the tiptoe story. These are the toe draggers. Maybe it was old, injured. Maybe it never evolved the full digitigrade stance. Or maybe it was from a line that just didn't quite make it nature's rough draft. You step alongside the prints, observing the slouch in the rhythm. It's slower, less confident. The path veers oddly, like it struggled to keep balance. This isn't a predator's walk. It's a question mark. Historians still debate whether toe dragging in some fossils indicates anatomical limitation or environmental choice. Was it a conscious adaptation to slippery terrain? Or was this just a less advanced gait doomed to be outcompeted? You follow the trackway until it intersects with another cleaner, faster. Toe only, no heel. The contrast is brutal. One looks like a signature, the other a smudge. It's like watching evolution happen in parallel, one step soaring, one stumbling. Odd fact break. In human babies, toe walking is common during the first stages of learning to walk. Only later do they settle into heel-first strides. Some evolutionary biologists see this as a developmental echo of our distant past. Our bodies remembering how to run before they remember how to walk. Back in the clearing, the heel prints start to fade into an incline. You climb it slowly and realize something strange. The toe dragger's steps become shallower, more erratic. Then they vanish completely. Maybe it stopped walking. Maybe it was caught. Or maybe it just gave up trying to keep pace. You look out from the top of the rise and see a wide stretch of fossilized ground below a literal dance floor of preserved trackways. Hundreds of prints crisscrossing in elegant chaos. Some sharp, some blurred. All of them digitigrade. You step down into it like someone entering a cathedral of movement. Here, tiptoe ruled. Each step tells a story: predator, chasing prey, juveniles skipping beside adults. Sudden turns, hesitations, lunges. It's not just a trackway, it's a film strip, a loop of lives playing on mute. And in none of them, none do you see a heel. You squat low beside a particularly deep set of prints. The toes press into the earth like they were spring-loaded. There's no sag, no slip, just tension and release. These were animals ready to jump at any moment, not just for speed, but for strategy. One joke drifts in, unwelcome but persistent. Why did the heel walker lose at tag? Because it kept getting stepped on. You laugh softly. The clearing deserves a little humor. Even ancient footprints deserve an audience, but the mood turns reflective as you rise. Because for every toe walker that made it, there were hundreds, maybe thousands of species that didn't. Creatures that dragged their feet, that moved too slow, that trusted the ground too much. You remember what you read once about muscle tendon loops and limb design. Tiptoeing doesn't just affect speed. It affects posture, energy, efficiency, even lung function. It's a full-body choice, a biomechanical lifestyle. Historians still can't agree on whether toe walking gave rise to flight or if it was simply a clever way to run. But here in this footprint gallery, it's clear this wasn't just evolution getting lucky. This was evolution deciding. You spend a moment staring at one set of tracks, tiny, deliberate, curved, just slightly left at the end. You follow them with your eyes and imagine the creature turning, hearing something, maybe sprinting away. It made a choice too. And you keep your heels lifted as you walk back across the clearing, because here among the ghosts you don't plod. You tiptoe. You leave the trackway gallery behind and descend into a shallow valley that glistens oddly in the fading light. At first you think it's wet, but then you realize it was wet once. What you're looking at is the ghost of a mudflat hardened over eons into rippled stone. You step carefully. The ground here remembers everything. Every footfall, every slip, every sprint. If a dinosaur so much as twitched a toe here 200 million years ago, the clay caught it and fossilized the panic. And sure enough, there they are again. Footprints, light ones, deep at the toe, barely there at the heel. You're not even surprised anymore. But this time something is different. These tracks twist and curl, forming gentle arcs across the mudflat, like someone dancing or dodging or trying not to sink. You crouch down, running your fingers along the ridges left by a single foot. The print is elongated, and the toes splay out like a swimmer's hand hitting water. You squish your own boot into the dried mud for comparison. Your heel sinks in hard even on this fossil-hardened surface. But the ancient print, it skims the surface. That animal barely touched the ground. It's here that the anatomy becomes more than just elegant. It becomes necessary. In this environment, slick, unstable, unpredictable, walking flat-footed meant disaster. Heel contact would spread your weight, slow you down, and more importantly, suck you in. Toe walking didn't just let dinosaurs move faster, it kept them above the mess. Odd fact: break flamingos, who also toe walk, are often found wading in swamps where the mud would trap heavier-footed animals. Their posture isn't for looks, it's for lift. You walk the edge of the fossil mudflat and spot something subtle. A shift in print depth, a rhythm. First it's walking, then the prints deepen. The stride lengthens, the toes dig in. It ran. Whatever was here, some small upright predator began to sprint at the edge of the water. But here's the beautiful part: the depth of the toes never breaks the pattern. No slippage, no collapse. It was using its tendons like suspension cables, pressing and releasing with each toe. Spring, release, spring, release. You imagine it in motion, feathers fluttering or maybe not yet, tail slicing the air, heels aloft. This is when you start seeing it more clearly. The tiptoe walk wasn't just a structural curiosity, it was a way to master the ground. To move across environments other animals sank into, trudged through, or got stuck in. Historians still argue about whether tendon efficiency or balance was the main driver of this adaptation. But looking at this terrain, one conclusion comes forward like a quiet truth. The tiptoe gait kept them clean, quick, safe. And that changes everything. You find a depression, likely an ancient wallow or feeding site. In the soft stone are hundreds of overlapping prints, but most of them are smeared, sloppy, heavy. Flat-footed creatures, perhaps larger ones, wading through and dragging their bellies. But one set of prints snakes through with finesse. Just toes, tight arcs, like someone threading a needle between footprints. You smile. One of the little ones made it through, probably grabbed a bite. Didn't sink. Lived to tiptoe another day. You try to walk it yourself. Heels down you slide, nearly fall. It's ridiculous. Then up on your toes, suddenly you glide. You laugh quietly, a little too loudly. Something stirs in the reeds nearby. You freeze, remembering the stakes again even in this ghost world. Another joke, mostly to calm yourself. What's the fastest way to ruin a tiptoe? Flatulence, or well, getting eaten. You shake your head, but you can't deny it. Humor and awe go hand in places like this. You circle back around the far edge of the mudflat, noticing that the terrain transitions again, more gravel, more uneven rock. The perfect place for a stumble, unless, of course, you're built for lift. The prints grow fainter here, shallower but no less precise. They dart up over a ridge, skipping stones and cracks, as if the creature knew where to place each toe. That's not instinct. That's design. You pause, watching a breeze ripple through the prehistoric reeds. The environment was merciless. It demanded efficiency, nothing extra, no wasted effort. And heel walkers, they were all extra. You stand tall again, not too tall, and lift your heels. You try a few steps across the uneven path, dodging between cracks and stones. Your calves burn, but it works. You feel the control in each step. The micro adjustments, the quiet. Historians often refer to this shift as one of the elegant accidents of evolution, but the more you walk through it, the less accidental it feels. This wasn't just a better way to move. It was a better way to be. The terrain changes again as you push deeper into the landscape. The forest thins. The wind picks up. And before you stretches a dry ridge flanked by low hills worn smooth by time. You pause at the crest, letting your gaze sweep across the open land below. It feels familiar. Not because you've been here, but because your brain recognizes something. You've seen this gate before, not just in fossils, not just in renderings of dinosaurs and artistic guesses, but in the everyday. You start to walk, but your mind wanders. You picture a chicken bobbing forward across a driveway. You picture a toddler on the tips of their toes sprinting through a living room. You even picture your neighbor's cat perpetually silent until it leaps 8 feet to your countertop. You blink. That's it. They still walk like this. You crouch near the edge of a slope and spot another line of fossil tracks, but this time you're not amazed. You're familiar. 3 toes, high arch, no heel. You could draw this footprint in your sleep now. But the magic is this: you sigh it echoed in every bird, every feline, every sneaky child. The tiptoe walk isn't gone. It just shape-shifted into our present. Odd fact. Brake chickens, when walking, use nearly the same joint structure as small theropod dinosaurs. Their heel is high off the ground. Their ankle joint sits midway up the leg, and their weight balances over 2 or 3 clawed toes. Replace the feathers with scales, and you've time-traveled 150 million years. You remember watching pigeons in the park, how they strut like they know secrets. You thought it was silly. Now you understand. They're not walking. They're remembering. Historians still debate how closely modern birds preserve the motion mechanics of their ancestors. But you don't need a journal article. You've seen the prints, and now you've seen the echo. You descend the slope, slowly scanning the area. The landscape is dusty but filled with brush and obstacles. You picture a small dinosaur weaving through, moving like that, cat hips, low heels, raised, every step placed just so. And that's when it hits you. This gait wasn't just about running. It was about navigating. Toe walking allows for quick course corrections, rapid pivots, sidestepping. All things that would be impossible with flat feet planted hard against the ground. These animals weren't just speedsters. They were agile thinkers, adapting with every step. You follow a modern analog through your memory. Watch a cheetah on a nature documentary. Its footfall is nearly silent. Its limbs long and lean. It never drops its heel. Or take your childhood dog. When it crept toward your dinner plate, it did it on its toes. Why? Because that's the ancestral method. And you gave it up. At some point, humans settled into their full-foot stride, trading agility for stability, grace for endurance. A joke bubbles up. If dinosaurs walked like cats, humans walk like shopping carts. You smirk, then almost trip on a loose rock? That's what you get. You pause beside another fossilized skeleton, this one fragmentary. But you recognize the hip bones, the posture, the ridiculously long toes. A primitive ornithomimid, maybe. The so-called ostrich mimic. You imagine it stepping through this same space with calculated calm. Not running, just gliding. It probably never even thought about how it walked. It just did. But you can't stop thinking about it now. Every modern animal you see back home will look different. The horse, the fox, the house cat, They're all wearing inherited shoes from the Mesozoic. Historians still puzzle over whether toe walking was learned each time it appeared or passed down in pieces reassembled like genetic Lego. But standing here with the past beneath your feet and modern echoes in your head, it doesn't feel like it ever went away. It feels like everything that walks on its toes is just remembering. You take a few more steps heel lifted, trying to channel that same ancestral memory. Your body wobbles slightly. Your muscles complain. But for a moment, you don't feel like a person anymore. You feel like something waiting to leap. The wind rises as you press farther along the trail, and the world opens into a flat, stony expanse. There are fewer trees now, fewer places to hide. Just miles of silence broken only by the crunch of your footsteps. But you aren't alone, not in the way that matters. Scattered across this barren plain are more trackways, but these feel different. You kneel near one and squint. They're wide, flat, no spring in the stride, no curve in the toe. The steps are close together, unsure, and the heel prints prominent, heavy. You're looking at the ones who didn't evolve, the flatfoots. They're not well known, even among paleontologists. These were creatures who looked a bit like dinosaurs, but never quite made the leap literally or figuratively. Their posture was awkward, their movement uncertain. They had the potential for greatness tucked inside their bones, but they never activated it. You walk alongside the tracks, the print spacing slow as if the animal was constantly hesitating. Maybe it was. Out here, hesitation got you killed. The fossil record is littered with these evolutionary footnotes. Reptiles that kept their heels on the ground, sprawling limbs, dragging bellies, dreams unfulfilled. And it's not that they were failures, they simply weren't chosen. One print ahead is pressed deeper than the others. A moment of panic, perhaps. A stumble. Maybe a predator approached and this poor flat foot tried to run, but it was too late. You step over the next print carefully. Its heel mark is messy. The toes splayed too wide. That's the thing about walking flat-footed. It gives you power, but it costs you time. Odd fact break: sloths, even today, walk with their entire feet touching the ground, but only when forced. They're so inefficient on land that they evolved to avoid it entirely. Maybe that was this creature's plan too, avoid walking. Avoid change. Historians still argue about why some Triassic animals resisted the digitigrade stance. Was it an ancestral holdover? Or simply a lack of selective pressure? Maybe their environment allowed them to plod, until it didn't. Because when the world changed, climates shifted. Predators grew faster. Competition rose, the toe walkers were ready. And these creatures, they weren't. You pause at a ridge where the flat-footed prints abruptly end. No sign of struggle, no predator's trail, just an ending. Like the trackway itself gave up, or maybe the animal did. You glance to your right and there it is, another trail. Narrow, clean, 3 toes, raised ankle. It cuts right past the flat prints with no overlap, no interference. It's like they lived in the same world but not the same reality. And maybe they didn't. You crouch beside both trails, one old, one older. The contrast is ridiculous. One moves like a question, the other like a promise. And here's the thing that makes you stop breathing for a moment. You realize that evolution isn't always kind. Sometimes it's brutally stylish. The tiptoe walkers weren't just survivors. They were opportunists. Every bit of anatomy, every lifted heel, every spring-loaded tendon, it was a vote for the future. A joke tickles your mind. What do you call a prehistoric creature that refused to get with the program extinct? You half laugh, half groan. Even the fossils would agree. You start walking again, tracing the lighter trail. The creature that left these prints wasn't particularly big, maybe dog-sized, but it moved like it had purpose. Each print pressed into the ground like a signature. Not desperate, not heavy, just present. You picture it navigating the same plain, weaving through heavier, louder animals. Maybe it watched the flatfoots and thought, not for me. You remember a modern analogy. The competition between VHS and Betamax. One had the better specs, the other adapted faster. The better choice doesn't always win. The faster one does. The same rule applies here. Historians call it competitive exclusion when one species simply outpaces another, leaving no room for cohabitation. That's what you're looking at. Not a massacre, not a war, just a foot race. And the flat-footed ones never stood a chance. You crest another small rise and glance back. The sun, if that's what this light is, hangs low. You see the paths clearly now, toe walkers zigzagging like dancers, flatfoots, marching like accountants. It wasn't even a competition. You lift your own heels as you walk forward. Because you know what happened next. Those cautious steps. They were the last ones. You enter a dry, cracked basin that feels like the hollowed-out shell of something once alive. The ground is pale and dusted with scattered fragments of bone. Tiny curved, almost like puzzle pieces someone gave up on halfway through. But one shape catches your eye. Not a full skeleton, just an impression subtle, shallow, and unmistakably rare. A soft tissue outline preserved by an ancient fluke. You crouch closer, barely breathing. Because this isn't just a bone. It's a footprint plus something more. You trace it slowly, the typical three-toed shape at the front, yes. But behind that, a faint swelling and arch a pad. And leading from it, not a heel but muscle grooves, tendon tracks, a roadmap of motion. You've stumbled on a moment in motion frozen solid. A footprint so complete that it caught the animal's muscle shape as it pushed off. You see it clearly. The flex of the ankle, the curl of the tendons, the lift of the heel. It's like a fossil X-ray, and it's whispering one thing: tiptoe was the default. Historians still debate the interpretation of these ultra-rare soft tissue fossils. Some say they're distorted impressions. Others insist they're windows into anatomy. But standing over this one, it feels impossible to deny what it shows: raised metatarsals, tight calves, and a toe grip like a ballerina trained in mud. Odd fact break. Scientists once discovered fossilized muscle impressions so precise they could identify specific tendons in the leg, like finding a thumbprint in stone, except the thumb belonged to a creature 200 million years gone. You follow the edge of the impression, your shadow falling across it. You try to mimic it, raising your heels just enough to match the angle. Your own tendons tighten. Your legs tremble. The posture feels absurd until you take a step. Suddenly you're lighter, faster, a little dizzy, honestly. But you get it. This isn't just a walking style. It's a way of carrying the self differently, suspended ready. And you begin to notice something else. Around the muscle impressions, the ground has a pitted texture like claw tips dug in gently. Not aggressively, not to attack, just to grip the earth to balance. That's what makes it work. It's not just about lifting the heel, it's about using the foot like a lever, a tension system, a spring. These creatures weren't stepping, they were rebounding. You stand again and move through the basin, eyes peeled now for things other than bones. You start watching negative space places where tendons would have been. The fossil record doesn't often preserve such details, but now you know where to look. On a nearby slab, you find a partial trackway with odd symmetry. Left, right, left, all with identical curve and pressure. That's not a limping animal, that's an efficient one. Muscles firing in near-perfect rhythm. You wonder how long it took for that stride to evolve. Hundreds of thousands of years, a million more. Or maybe it only took a few daring steps from one little creature who just couldn't bear to walk like its cousins. The fossilized impression behind you starts to blur in the rising breeze, dust softening the edges. But you've already memorized it. You can feel the anatomy in your own feet now. It's like wearing someone else's shoes, only the shoes are made of bone and purpose. Another joke drifts in. What do you call a dinosaur track with built-in suspension, a shockosaurus? You shake your head, but you're smiling. Because the more you think about it, the more you realize this wasn't just an improvement. This was evolution showing off. It could have gone with brute strength or armor or size. But instead, it went with finesse. A raised heel, a graceful stride, a posture that whispered, "Catch me if you can." You step over another set of muscle-marked prints and realize something else. You're not just tracking motion anymore. You're tracking intent. These animals were purposeful. Every footfall was calibrated. And somewhere inside that lifted heel is the first flicker of what would become agility. Intelligence, strategy. The body knew something before the brain could name it. And you keep walking, heel-lifted tendons tight, ready to spring. Because the muscles are gone now, but the shape remains. You leave the basin behind and enter a corridor of ancient stone. It rises around you like ribs, tall, curved, bone-pale cliffs where erosion has carved out stories and layers. The wind whistles through it low and rhythmic, almost like breath. And then you see something perched on a ledge up ahead, a partial skeleton tilted slightly, as if caught mid-pose. Long legs, small curved claws, and the arms are the arms. Tiny, tucked, comically small. You chuckle. There it is, the meme-worthy classic. Tiny-armed, big-legged dinosaur. Probably a theropod, maybe something like Ceratosaurus or an early abelisaurid. You walk up to it and stare. And here's where the debate begins. You crouch, examining the balance between the body's proportions. Enormous hind limbs built like pistons, feet with long toes, clearly digitigrade, clearly designed for springing forward. But those arms, they look like evolutionary afterthoughts. Historians still debate whether the rise of tiptoe locomotion caused arm reduction or whether they just happened to co-occur in a changing ecosystem. Some argue that as legs became more powerful and movement more specialized, arms were left behind. Others think the arms simply weren't needed in pursuit hunting where teeth and feet did the work. But as you examine the skeleton, a theory forms in your mind. Maybe the tiptoe walk gave them such power and precision in the lower body that the upper limbs became obsolete. The legs were doing everything. You picture it now, this creature, let's call her Mara, darting through the undergrowth tail, high claws flashing at the ends of her feet. She doesn't miss a step. She doesn't need her arms. She's doing just fine without them. Odd fact break. Some modern birds, like the cassowary, retain small, nearly invisible wings that serve little purpose. But their legs, razor-sharp and terrifying. Nature's priorities made clear. You climb a little higher beside the fossil, examining the pelvis. The hip sockets are positioned to drive the legs straight down, not out to the side. It's an upright stride, tight and close. And with the heel raised, it gives every muscle in the thigh and calf more room to stretch and fire. You imagine this same body with long, heavy arms. It'd be off balance, slower, awkward. The body figured it out, lighten the load. Focus on the toes. The result. An athlete, a sprinter, a silent hunter with the swagger of someone who doesn't need backup. You trace your fingers along the vertebrae. Even the spine is angled to accommodate this posture. Head forward, tail out like a seesaw. Every joint tuned to stay poised. The more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Digitigrade posture didn't just change how they walked, it reshaped the entire body. Shrinking arms, enlarging hips, creating a creature that could launch, pivot, lunge, and land all on its toes. You picture a pack of them now racing through dawn fog, arms barely visible but legs kicking like loaded springs. If they had a slogan, it would be, "Arms are for amateurs." And maybe, just maybe, that's why they seemed so comically proportioned to us, because we can't imagine not needing our arms. But these creatures didn't imagine, they moved. Another joke floats in. Why don't tiptoeing dinosaurs do push-ups? Because their arms are just here for decoration. You laugh not too loudly. The rocks around you might echo. You keep walking. Around a bend, you find another fossilized trackway. But this one is strange. It zigzags abruptly and the prints are uneven, left foot deep, right foot shallow. You wonder if the animal was injured, or if it was dodging something, maybe both. But even in that uneven gait, the toes still press deep. The heel never touches. Even in pain or panic, this creature stayed on its toes. That's how hardwired it was. The posture wasn't optional. It was the animal. You glance back toward the fossil, now a silhouette in the dusk. Arms small, legs ready. Historians still revisit the debate every few years. Were the arms useless? Did tiptoeing make them obsolete? Or were they for something else entirely, mating rituals, balance digging? But here, surrounded by prints and bones and long shadows, it feels like the real answer is simpler. Tiptoeing didn't require sacrifice. It just required focus. Every evolutionary step said, run faster, be lighter, get there first. And those arms, they didn't keep up. You continue along this ridge, your own feet shifting into that old posture, ankles raised, knees soft. You feel what they felt, readiness. Because when you've got feet like these who needs hands, the stone ridge narrows, curling like a spine across the land, and you follow it until the world around you opens into a bowl of dry forest and scattered logs. Something about the layout feels arranged like a performance venue carved by time. And sure enough, in the dust at your feet, the prints reappear. This time, they don't just walk. They leap. You spot it instantly, a deep toe imprint followed by nothing, then another set several feet ahead. The pattern repeats. Posse vanished land, dust. This isn't a walk, it's a hop, a leap, maybe even a sprint-laced dance. You step beside the first print and crouch. The toes dig in so sharply that it looks like the foot punched downward. The back claw leaves a graceful arc, a stabilizer midair. It's the footprint of a creature born to spring. Historians have pored over fossil trackways like this with a mix of awe and confusion. Were these running gaits escapes play, or something more expressive? Some have even proposed that small theropods, especially in open areas like this, leapt and pivoted as a form of display. To court, to assert, or maybe just because they could. You follow the leap trail as it zigzags, arcs wide, then cuts back abruptly, like someone running drills on a playground. There's no evidence of pursuit, no chase, just motion for motion's sake. And now you see it, this wasn't hunting, this was joy. The creature that left these prints was alive in a way that feels suddenly modern. It moved because it wanted to, not just to eat or survive, but to test its legs. To feel the spring of its tendons, the bounce of its raised heels, the soft resistance of the ground yielding beneath its toes. Odd fact break. Baby goats, penguins, and even horses are known to play leap in their early months, not for survival, but because the body is learning, practicing, rehearsing joy. You glance up and imagine the scene. A juvenile theropod, maybe a Compsognathus, maybe something earlier, darting between stumps, vaulting over brushtail extended like a tightrope walker's pole. It lands lightly toes first, never flat. You try to imitate the leap. You press your feet into the earth, lift your heels, crouch, and spring. You don't go far, maybe a meter. But when you land, you understand. There's something electric in the gesture. A flash of power stored in calf and ankle released in one smooth arc. These creatures weren't just moving, they were flying by foot. You step alongside the prints again. You can see where the toes twist, shifting mid-leap. A built-in stabilizer, no modern runner could match it. These animals weren't built for straight lines, they were built for improvisation. And now, new thought enters. Maybe tiptoe walking wasn't just about efficiency. Maybe it was about expression. You walk flat-footed when you have to. But when you're playing, showing off, making a statement, you rise. You lift your arms instinctively, not to fly, but to balance as you mimic another hop. You land light. Not bad. Still human, but you feel a little closer to something lost. Historians still hesitate to call prehistoric behavior play. It feels indulgent, too speculative. But what else could explain the looping, skipping trails etched into stone like cursive signatures? Not every action was calculated. Some were just alive. Another joke springs up. What's a dinosaur's favorite dance move? The toe taposaurus. You don't even groan. You just smile and keep moving. Farther down the trail, you find a fallen tree fossilized in place, and sure enough, a single footprint lands squarely on top of it. No heel, just a clean, bold toe mark smack in the center like a dancer hitting their mark on stage. That leap wasn't necessary. It was deliberate. You pause beside it, hand resting on petrified bark. You realize this might be the first truly personal footprint you found. Not a survival print, not a panic press, just an exclamation mark. A little dinosaur saying, "I'm here. I can leap. Watch me." And maybe that's what separated the tiptoe walkers from the rest. Not just anatomy, but attitude. You walk onward following the prints as they stretch and shrink, land and lift until they finally vanish into a tumble of stone. The trail ends. The performance concludes. But the echo of that leap stays with you, because for a moment the past didn't walk. It flew. The trail fades into stone, but your feet keep moving, down now into a narrow channel between tall sandstone walls. The temperature drops. The light flattens. You step cautiously. The ground is etched with a chaos of lines and cracks. Some natural, some maybe not. Then you see them. Tracks again, but something's different. You pause, crouch, tilt your head. At first glance, they look flat-footed, spread wide toes, smudged, almost clumsy. But you've learned to squint, to doubt, to read the ground like a stubborn book. And then it clicks. They're not flat-footed. They're distorted. You kneel beside one print and examine the way the sediment bulges outward around the toe marks. It's not what a foot would do when stepping softly. It's what a foot does when it's pushing off hard, springing forward, heel never even touching the ground. Someone misread these. You feel a chill not from the wind, but from realization. These tracks were once part of a famous discovery long cited as proof of flat-footed Triassic dinosaurs. Whole textbooks nodded at them. But now, fresh analysis, updated imaging, and smarter eyes have suggested something else. These prints belong to a tiptoe walker mid-run, launching from one foot to the next. Historians still debate it. There are papers, counterpapers, diagrams. Some claim erosion mimicked toe pressure. Others say it's all in the sediment composition. But you're here now in the fossil trench itself, and the ground is telling you a different story. These prints weren't clumsy. They were athletic. Odd fact break. A 21st century fossil site once interpreted dozens of ambiguous prints as flat-footed. Decades later, a reanalysis using 3D mapping revealed mid-foot lift and toe-driven propulsion, proof that even ancient science can have second thoughts. You move farther down the trench following the prints as they stretch and curve. You notice more clues. No drag marks, no scuffing. Just toe-to-toe leaps with perfect spacing. Even when the trackway turns, especially when it turns, you see the unmistakable twist of a creature pivoting on the balls of its feet. It was dancing again. The irony is sharp. For decades, this very set of tracks was used to argue that some early dinosaurs hadn't yet developed tiptoe gait. But now, with new tools and hindsight, the evidence flips the story on its head. Literally, you sit on a rock beside the trackway and let out a long breath. How many other misread fossils lie out there? How many truths buried not by earth but by assumption? It makes you wonder if some ancient creatures walked lighter than we ever realized. Not just physically, but mythically. How many stories of the past are half told because someone mistook grace for clumsiness? You picture that animal now. Maybe a small theropod, maybe something unnamed zipping through this canyon like it owned it. Toes pressing in like punctuation. Each leap deliberate. Each twist intuitive. You imagine someone watching it from behind, struggling to keep up. Maybe another dinosaur. Maybe something else entirely. Maybe in some parallel universe a joke drifts in like a breeze. Why didn't the dinosaur leave a flat impression? Because it had better things to do. You grin. The fossil agrees. You rise and walk the trail again, this time backwards, retracing the prints. They tell a different story now, no longer an uncertain shuffle, but a confident stride. And that's the magic of the fossil record. It's not just bones and prints. It's memory waiting for the right eyes. Historians still revise old trackways all the time. What was once a waddle becomes a sprint. What looked like hesitation becomes a jump. Evolution didn't leave instructions, it left riddles. And tonight you've answered one. These creatures weren't slow, heavy-footed brutes. They were dancers, miscast as plotters. You reach the mouth of the canyon and look back once more. The toe marks gleam faintly in the setting light, arranged like a sentence that once told the wrong story. Now it sings. You climb out of the canyon slowly, your calves tight, your balance instinctively shifting forward. You don't drop your heels. Not yet. The postures become a habit, now familiar, even comforting. And as you rise onto the plain above, you see it, the last trackway. It leads across a broad stretch of ancient earth, cracked and open to the sky. One final print, one last leap. The creature that left this trail was alone. You can tell. No parallel prints, no confusion of crossings, just a single path curving gently through stone and silence. It moves steadily at first, then faster. You kneel and run your hand along the deepest impression. It's perfect. Clean. Narrow at the back, wide at the toe. No heel. Whoever this was, they never came down. The prints start to space wider now. Longer strides. The body picking up speed, but still no loss of control, no skidding. Just a perfect tiptoe sprint through the bones of time. You follow it? The trail leads toward a small rise, nothing more than a ripple in the landscape. The final print rests at its crest. It's pressed so deeply that the ground cracked around it. The toes drove downward with incredible force. No second print follows. This was a leap. You stand beside it and look out over the far side of the ridge. There's nothing. Just open stone and the wash of wind. No landing, no further marks, just stillness. You imagine the creature frozen mid-air in the final second of its life. Maybe it jumped over something. Maybe it was escaping. Maybe it was reaching. You'll never know what happened next. That's the cruelty of extinction. It erases the landing but leaves the takeoff behind. Historians still argue about whether this final print represents a literal end. Was the creature caught by predators? Did it fall into water? Was it swallowed by a landslide? The fossil record goes silent. But here now you don't need an answer. You stare at that print toes etched into rock like a signature. And you realize even in its last moment it stayed on tiptoe. There's something heartbreakingly noble about that. No stumble, no collapse, just a final perfect push into the air. Heels high, muscles tense, posture ready. You crouch one last time and place your fingers where the claws once pressed. The ground is cool, but the gesture is warm. A quiet handshake across time. Odd fact break. Some fossilized last steps have been found at the edges of ancient floodplains, cut off abruptly by evidence of volcanic ash or water surge. They call them dead runs. But this one, it feels different. It feels like a choice. You look behind you over the miles you've followed, prints in mudflats, in dry basins, in fossil dance floors, sprinters, leapers, dancers, and ghosts, all of them on their toes. And now you exhale slowly. You lower your heels at last. The moment stretches. The fossil doesn't move. The world doesn't need to. It's done. The first dinosaurs didn't rule with size or strength. They walked on tiptoe. And they never stopped moving forward. You've walked across forgotten floodplains, through forests that remember every footfall, and into the silent trenches of prehistoric canyons. Along the way, you've traced the evolution of one strange idea, that the first dinosaurs didn't just walk, they walked on tiptoe. At first, it seemed like a quirk, a mechanical trick for lightness or speed, but with every fossil, every trackway, every preserved muscle groove and vanished heel, a new picture emerged. These weren't clumsy beasts dragging themselves through primeval mud. They were poised, deliberate, coiled like springs, ready. You've watched as creatures balanced on stilt-like legs and launched themselves like dancers across terrain where flat-footed rivals sank and failed. You've seen crocodilian cousins rise to walk the same way only to fade back into the swamps. You've glimpsed echoes of their gait in chickens, cats, and even toddlers' reminders that some instincts never really disappear. Most haunting of all, you stood beside the final print, one last perfect leap before silence. No heel, no error, just a final statement in stone. In the end, the story wasn't about anatomy or locomotion. It was about elegance. These creatures didn't just adapt. They chose motion as art. Their feet whispered forward, and even in extinction they landed light. Now close your eyes. Let that last footprint settle in your thoughts. You're safe. You're still. The world has gone quiet, and somewhere in the stone beneath your feet, the echo of that leap is still suspended in midair,